President-elect Trump is vowing to impose 100% tariffs on BRICS nations unless they commit to not developing a new currency.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has threatened to increase 100% import tariffs on all goods from BRICS member countries if the bloc moves ahead with plans to introduce a new BRICS.
The top story that we're tracking at this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump has warned of BRICS member countries from replacing the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency.
In a highly charged statement that shook the international stage, President Donald Trump recently delivered a sharp warning to the BRICS nations. Any attempts to challenge the supremacy of the U.S. dollar would be met with swift and severe repercussions. The message was clear, concise, and carried the weight of an economic powerhouse. The U.S. would not tolerate any encroachment on its dollar's dominance in global trade. Trump's warning came with a bold and unprecedented threat: 100% tariffs on countries that undermine the dollar. His declaration was not only a statement of economic intent, but also a political one. The U.S., through the dominance of its currency, has maintained its global power for decades. The dollar's status as the world's reserve currency has afforded the U.S. a unique position of strength, especially when it comes to global trade and finance. It's a tool of leverage, both in trade agreements and in its ability to impose economic sanctions. The question now is whether BRICS, a coalition of emerging economies, including Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, would back down in the face of such a threat or continue with their growing efforts to reduce reliance on the dollar. Historically, the U.S. has used its control over global financial systems to shape international economics in its favor. However, BRICS nations are increasingly questioning this and looking for ways to decouple from the dollar's dominance. While the U.S.'s message was stern, the reality is that BRICS nations are not easily intimidated. These countries, representing over 40% of the world's population and a significant portion of the global GDP, are pushing forward with their own strategies to reduce reliance on the dollar. Despite Trump's strong stance, this might just be the opening salvo in a battle that will determine the future of global finance. Will the U.S. dollar remain as the bedrock of the international monetary system? Or will emerging powers succeed in reshaping the landscape? While Trump's threats may have raised concerns within the BRICS group, the nations comprising this bloc are showing a determination to assert their financial independence. Over the last few years, BRICS countries have been building strategies to reduce their dependence on the U.S. dollar, and the warning from Trump has only amplified their commitment to break free from the dollar's dominance. One of the most significant initiatives has been the push for local currency trade. The idea is simple: trade with each other in local currencies instead of relying on the U.S. dollar as a middleman. This move reduces the risk of currency fluctuations tied to the U.S. dollar and opens up opportunities for greater financial autonomy. Take Brazil and China, for instance. These two countries have made major strides in this direction by agreeing to trade directly in their own currencies, the Chinese yuan and the Brazilian real. The shift is highly symbolic. It marks a decisive move away from the dollar-centric financial system. And it's not just Brazil and China. Other BRICS countries, such as India and Russia, are also looking into similar arrangements, paving the way for a future where the U.S. dollar is no longer a necessary intermediary for trade among emerging economies. In addition to local currency trading, BRICS has been pushing for alternative financial systems that bypass the traditional Western-dominated networks like SWIFT, Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. These are bold steps that are more than just economic maneuvers. They are geopolitical moves aimed at asserting independence from the West and reducing the economic and political leverage the United States holds over these nations. The strategy is clear. BRICS nations want to create a financial ecosystem that is not reliant on the U.S. dollar. This not only serves their economic interests, but also acts as a direct challenge to the long-standing U.S. influence over global finance. One of the most powerful moves BRICS has made in its pursuit of financial independence is the massive accumulation of gold. As of 2024, BRICS countries own 6,200 tons of gold, which will represent over 21% of the world's total gold reserves. This is not just about stockpiling precious metals. It's a carefully crafted strategy to protect these countries from financial instability and economic sanctions, which have been a tool of leverage for the U.S. in the past. Gold has long been seen as a safe haven asset. In times of economic uncertainty, gold tends to hold its value, unlike paper currencies that can fluctuate wildly. For BRICS nations, the idea behind accumulating vast amounts of gold is simple. They want to shield themselves from the volatility and uncertainty that can come from being tied to the US dollar, and by extension, the global financial system dominated by Western powers. In a world where the US dollar plays such a pivotal role in global trade, gold provides BRICS countries with an alternative asset that is less vulnerable to US sanctions or political decisions. As the US and other Western nations continue to wield the power of the dollar for geopolitical gain, BRICS is looking to create an alternative store of value that is insulated from these pressures. The gold accumulation strategy reflects a long-term vision for a financially independent future. It's a signal to the world. BRICS isn't just talking about change, they are preparing for it. Their gold reserves will act as a financial buffer, ensuring that these nations are prepared for any financial crisis, including the fallout that might come from challenging the dollar's dominance. Let's talk about one of the most game-changing developments in the BRICS strategy, the launch of BRICS Pay. This new cross-border payment platform uses blockchain technology to enable BRICS nations to transact directly in their local currencies, bypassing traditional Western financial systems. This is a direct challenge to SWIFT, the international financial messaging system that has been dominated by the US and European powers for decades. BRICS Pay is more than just a payment system. It represents a revolutionary shift in how these nations are choosing to conduct financial transactions. One of the key advantages of this platform is that it eliminates the need for currency conversion fees and significantly reduces transaction costs. This is especially important for countries like Brazil, Russia, and China, who are working to reduce their exposure to the US dollar. SWIFT has long been the backbone of global financial transactions, but it has also been a tool of US influence. The US has used its dominance over SWIFT to impose sanctions on countries like Iran and Russia, effectively cutting them off from the global financial system. BRICS Pay aims to bypass this system entirely, offering an alternative that is controlled by BRICS countries themselves. With BRICS Pay, these nations are not only seeking to reduce the cost of cross-border transactions, they are also positioning themselves as a serious challenger to the Western financial infrastructure. This is a critical step in the long-term goal of creating a more independent, multipolar global financial system. The success of BRICS Pay will be a signal that the US-dominated financial architecture is no longer the only game in town. For BRICS countries, this move is about more than just economics. It's about political and financial sovereignty. By creating a payment system that bypasses US-controlled infrastructure, BRICS is actively working to build an economic order that is more balanced and fair, especially for emerging economies that have long felt sidelined by Western financial institutions. For all the bold moves that BRICS nations are making, it's important to recognize that the US dollar is still deeply embedded in the global financial system. The dollar is the world's reserve currency, used in approximately 60% of global foreign exchange reserves, and the dominant currency in international trade, particularly in energy markets. It's no exaggeration to say that the US dollar is the backbone of global finance, deeply woven into financial networks, trade agreements, and global institutions. The US dollar's dominance is also reinforced by its role in global financial markets. The dollar is used in the majority of foreign exchange transactions, settles trade between countries, and serves as the standard for commodities like oil, gold, and other natural resources. This provides the United States with unparalleled economic leverage, especially in times of global crisis or geopolitical tension. But BRICS's push for local currency trade, their gold accumulation strategy, and the creation of alternatives like BRICS Pay are shaking the foundations of this system. The growing efforts of BRICS to reduce their reliance on the US dollar represent a direct challenge to the global financial system that has been dominated by the West for decades. That said, the US dollar remains dominant for now, but the tension between the US and BRICS is building. BRICS nations are not only seeking greater financial independence, they are working to reshape the global financial system. creating an alternative path that could eventually erode the dollar's supremacy. As we've seen with other global shifts throughout history, the future may hold significant changes that could challenge the dollar's place at the top. This battle is far from over. The US dollar's dominance might not disappear overnight, but BRICS is making it clear that they are serious contenders for a larger role in the global financial system. Whether the US can hold on to its dominant position, or if BRICS's efforts will lead to a fundamental shift in global finance remains to be seen, but the stakes could not be higher. As the global financial landscape evolves, the role of Canada has become increasingly pivotal, especially in the context of Trump's protectionist policies and BRICS's drive for financial independence. A key figure stepping into the political arena to address these challenges is Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada. Carney, known for his deep understanding of global financial systems, is now poised to take on Donald Trump's aggressive trade policies from the Canadian political front. Carney's entry into politics has been fueled by his concern over the economic ramifications of Trump's trade wars and protectionist measures. Trump's tariffs on Canadian products, such as steel, aluminum, and wine, have significantly impacted Canada's economy, putting major industries at risk. Trump's America First strategy has primarily centered on unilateral tariffs and trade restrictions, which Carney believes are harmful not only to the US, but to its closest allies, particularly Canada. Canada, which shares one of the largest trade relationships with the US, has been increasingly vulnerable to the fallout of Trump's protectionism. The most recent threat, a 200% tariff on Canadian wine imports, has led to growing concerns over the future of the US-Canada trade relationship. This is where Carney has become more vocal, positioning himself to address these challenges head-on. Carney's stance on global trade cooperation opposes the US's isolationist approach. While Trump's policies are based on the principle of protecting American jobs and industries, Carney advocates for a collaborative economic strategy that strengthens ties with both the US and the rest of the world. This vision includes reducing trade barriers and promoting fairer, mutually beneficial trade agreements. Carney argues that Canada's future economic prosperity relies on multilateralism, not the protectionist policies Trump has championed. In his pursuit to influence Canada's economic future, Carney is preparing to challenge the economic policies of the current U.S. administration. As of March 2025, Carney is expected to officially call for elections in Canada, aiming to gain a mandate to address Trump's tariff threats and economic policies that have long been a source of tension between the two nations. In a recent statement, Carney made it clear that his political platform would focus heavily on Canadian economic autonomy in the face of U.S. policies that could potentially harm Canada's domestic industries. He plans to advocate for more diversified trade partnerships, reducing Canada's over-reliance on the U.S., and strengthening relationships with BRICS nations, the European Union, and other emerging markets. This approach mirrors the broader BRICS strategy of moving away from U.S. dollar dependency and expanding global trade networks without being dominated by the U.S. The economic dispute with the U.S., especially around tariffs, has spurred Canada to reevaluate its economic alliances. While Trump's tariffs have caused a dent in certain sectors, Canada is exploring ways to strengthen its economic sovereignty and financial autonomy, reducing the risks associated with relying too heavily on the U.S. Carney's political rise is partly a response to the growing tension over Trump's trade policies, which threaten to harm key industries and damage Canada's economic standing in the world. Carney's message is clear: Canada must seek alternative economic pathways. While the U.S. remains a critical trade partner, Carney's focus is on ensuring that Canada is not just a bystander in the economic and geopolitical decisions being made by the U.S. Instead, he advocates for policies that promote economic stability through diversification of trade relationships and the development of independent financial systems, a strategy similar to what BRICS is pursuing on a global scale. Carney is also emphasizing the importance of investing in Canadian industries that will ensure the country's long-term financial security, especially as global markets continue to shift away from U.S.-dominated financial systems. If elected, Carney's leadership could position Canada as a neutral but influential player in the changing dynamics of global trade, aligning with emerging powers while also maintaining strong ties with traditional Western allies. As the global financial landscape continues to shift, the tension between established Western powers and emerging economies will only intensify. BRICS countries have made it clear that they will no longer accept the dollar's unchallenged reign, and with their ambitious financial plans, they are pushing the world toward a multipolar financial order. Meanwhile, President Trump's protectionist stance threatens to ignite further trade wars, not only with Canada but also with other global powers. Mark Carney, with his focus on financial cooperation, is emerging as a potential leader who could help steer Canada, and by extension, the world, through these turbulent times. The future is uncertain, but one thing is clear: the global financial system is at a crossroads, and the next few years will determine whether the US dollar can retain its dominant position or whether emerging economies, aided by voices like Carney's, will succeed in reshaping the world's economic order. The challenge ahead is not just about tariffs and trade wars. It's about the balance of power, politically, economically, and financially. How this will unfold remains to be seen, but the world is watching closely.